Russia repeatedly hit Ukrainians' emergency and energy crews in double terror strikes. China and North Korea economically taking over eastern Russia, and how Indian refineries to slash Russian oil purchases following Trump's statement. The latest news next. Russia launched more than 300 drones and 37 missiles at Ukraine last night, once again employing a tactic of double terror. Critical infrastructure and civilian targets in 5 regions were hit, according to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Last night brought strikes against our people, our energy sector, and our civilian infrastructure. Russia launched more than 300 attack drones and 37 missiles, a significant number of them ballistic, against Ukraine.
According to him, the infrastructure of Vinnytsia, Sumy and Poltava regions was under Russian attack. In the Chernihiv region, Nizhyn was hit, the post office was damaged, and 1 person was wounded. In the Kharkiv region, the Russians struck critical infrastructure, part of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine.
There are wounded. Recovery efforts are underway everywhere. Emergency services are working. And there is confirmation that the Russians are using double terror, attacking with Shaheds carrying cluster munitions and launching repeated strikes to injure firefighters and energy workers who are restoring damaged facilities.
According to the president of Ukraine, this fall the Russians are using every day to strike our energy infrastructure.
Putin has turned a deaf ear to everything the world says, so the only language that can still get through to him is the language of pressure. Pressure through sanctions and pressure through long-range capabilities. Strong decisions are possible, decisions that can help. And this depends on the United States, on Europe, on all partners whose strength directly determines whether the war will be ended.
He stresses that the momentum for achieving peace in the Middle East is important now. In Europe, this is also possible. That is exactly what I will be discussing today and tomorrow in Washington, he adds. Ukrainian defense forces struck the Saratov oil refinery overnight on October 16th, which is involved in supplying Russia's armed forces, according to the General Staff and Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. On the night of October 16th, 2025, Ukrainian defense forces struck the Saratov oil refinery in Russia's Saratov region, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported. It is noted that the Saratov oil refinery is one of the oldest oil processing enterprises in Russia. As of 2023, oil refining volume totaled 4.8 million tons. The enterprise is involved in meeting the needs of Russia's armed forces.
Ukraine's defense forces are consistently implementing a set of measures to strike critical elements of the military-industrial base of Russia to deprive it of the ability to continue aggression.
Special Operations Forces struck the refinery. On the night of October 16th, units of the Special Operations Forces struck the Saratov oil refinery in Russia's Saratov region, the Special Operations Forces reported. It is known that the refinery is part of Rosneft's corporate structure, Russian state-owned oil company. The oil refining volume amounted to 7.2 million tons in 2020 and 4.8 million tons in 2023. The Special Operations Forces struck this facility exactly 1 month earlier, on September 16th, 2025. The Special Operations Forces continued to carry out asymmetric actions aimed at stopping the enemy, the statement added. Some Indian oil refineries are planning to gradually reduce imports of Russian oil. The US is pressuring India to abandon Russian raw materials and help speed up the end of Russia's war against Ukraine, Reuters reports. US President Donald Trump said that Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi assured him of his willingness to stop buying oil from Russia, which is currently India's main supplier.
So I was not happy that India was buying oil, and he, Modi, assured me today that they will not be buying oil from Russia.
Trump told these reporters during an event at the White House, India seeks to maintain prices and supplies. The Indian Ministry of Foreign Affairs responded by stating that the country's main priorities remain stable energy prices and guaranteed supplies.
It has been our consistent priority to safeguard the interests of the Indian consumer in a volatile energy scenario. Our import policies are guided entirely by this objective.
However, the ministry did not mention Trump's comments on Russian oil purchases. Foreign Ministry spokesman Randhir Jaiswal added that Washington has expressed interest in deepening energy cooperation with India. He said negotiations were ongoing. Trade negotiations and tariff pressure. Indian officials are currently in Washington to participate in trade negotiations. The US has doubled tariffs on Indian goods to push New Delhi to reduce imports of Russian oil. The US has stated that restricting such purchases will be a key condition for lowering tariffs and concluding a trade agreement. India and China remain the largest buyers of Russian seaborne oil, taking advantage of discounts that Moscow has been forced to offer after Europe refused to purchase and the US and EU imposed sanctions for the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Indian refineries ask for time. Despite Washington's statements, Indian oil refineries have not yet received official orders from the government to stop purchasing Russian oil. Reuters sources claim that an immediate halt to purchases is impossible, as a sharp transition to other grades would lead to an increase in world prices and exacerbate inflation. From April to September 2025, India imported 1.75 million barrels of Russian oil per day, accounting for about 36% of all suppliers, while a year earlier this figure was 40%. At the same time, US oil supplies increased by 6.8% to 213,000 barrels per day. The share of oil from the Middle East increased to 45% from 42% over the same period last year. China and North Korea are gradually taking over the eastern regions of Russia economically, thus Russia is increasingly paying off its allies in the war against Ukraine with its own territories, according to the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine. China is increasing its economic influence. According to forecasts, its investments in the region could reach 1 trillion rubles by 2025. However, most of the deals are related to trade. There are no infrastructure projects. According to Viktor Kalashnikov, a senator from the Khabarovsk territory, in 2024, the volume of Russian-Chinese trade increased by 5.5 million tons, and in the first half of 2025 by another 36%. At the same time, China is conducting a creeping demographic expansion. Up to 2 million Chinese already live between Vladivostok and the Urals, and this number is growing. This is facilitated by privileges and the introduction of a visa-free regime. Enclaves are even being formed where Russians practically do not work. North Korea's participation in expansion. At the same time, Moscow is involving North Korea in the development of the region. Over the past year, more than 15,000 North Korean workers have arrived in the Far East, and unofficially up to 50,000 Russian companies have already ordered 153,000 labor contracts. This creates a situation where two nuclear powers are simultaneously strengthening their positions on the territory of a third. China is forming economic dependence, and North Korea is forming labor dependence. Both countries are solving their own problems at the expense of Russian resources. In the long term, the growth of China's presence and the expansion of North Korean labor quotas could create a conflict of interest between the partners. The Kremlin risks losing control of 40% of its own territory, almost 7 million square kilometers, with a population of 7.9 million people, turning the Far East into an arena for foreign strategies. That's all for today. Thanks for watching this video. Support Ukraine, like and subscribe.